Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Pages to Pixels podcast. I'm Keetna and today I have someone really special with me. This is my good friend Nethra. She's a cinematographer, she's a Bharatanatyam dancer. She's based out of New York and is shooting a bunch of indie projects there now. There's a lot of cool stuff to say about her, other than the fact that she was my roommate for a while. She trained under Ravi Varman, she was a part of the Academy Gold program, and she trained under some really cool people when we were in school together. Do you want to fill us in, Nethra?
So I went to New York Film Academy. I did my master's in cinematography there. And our chair of cinematography department was Anthony Richmond. So he had shot Legally Blonde and a bunch of other cool stuff.
Alright, so this is obviously a different episode than what we are used to filming. Usually we just talk about films and what we think about them. But the Academy Awards just happened a couple of weeks ago, and for the first time in the history of the institution, a woman was awarded, a woman won Best Cinematography, which was extremely bittersweet. It's great to see somebody win, but also 2026, like what the hell? So I thought this would be a good opportunity to chat with, another fellow female cinematographer. I'm sure you watched the Academy Awards, Nethra, and I know you watched Sinners as well. Did you have thoughts you wanted to share?
Yeah, I did watch the Academy Awards, and it was high time that a woman cinematographer finally won. And she was not only making history by being the first woman to win the Academy Award, she was also the first woman to shoot on an IMAX 65mm camera, which is really bizarre because that's not something you would think of. And I don't think that's something, because I watched one of her interviews, and I don't think that's something that even Autumn thought about. Somebody pointed it out and she figured out, I didn't know that I was the first woman to shoot on an IMAX 65mm camera. So I guess all of us are just trying to shoot something that serves the story, not realizing that, one day we would be winning the Academy Award. But for it to take this long for a woman to win in the cinematography field is bizarre. So, but I would like to do a positive spin on this, that I'm glad that it finally happened. And it kind of sets a precedence for me as well, a positive precedence for me as well, that she has done it, so finally all of us also have something to look forward to. Windows and doors open up, opportunities open up. Yeah.
No, I mean, that makes a lot of sense. I think, especially growing up, we both grew up in India. I feel like, especially in the film industry, there were obviously a lot of women to look up to, but behind the camera, I think the names were very few and far between, at least the ones that made it out into the limelight. So it is really cool to see somebody get, recognized at a global stage, as late as it is. But the film, though, was incredible. It was my favorite film of the year. Cinematography obviously stood out to me, and it did to the Academy members. What did you think of her work in general? Is there something you want to point out about the film?
The biggest thing that stood out in Sinners to me while watching her interviews and generally watching the movie itself, I thought it was a good example for a good DP and director collaboration, because Coogler seemed to have a pretty strong vision while approaching his DP. He knew that he wanted to see the landscape, the horizon. He first wanted to shoot it on a 16mm to kind of translate how the story feels, and Autumn then brings her technical expertise in the visual language, and eventually they figure out it has to be a 65mm, and she works with shallow depth of field to kind of highlight the character's emotions, and using 50mm and 80mm Panavision lenses. And they finally keep experimenting, doing tests, and arrive at the look that we see today. And I also feel like Autumn's biggest strengths that I observe is her perceptiveness to the characters in a story. I feel every DP has a style, and from what I see in her movies, both in Wakanda Forever and Sinners, which both demand strong establishing visuals of the time and space, which is very different from our own present world today. So, but then she very skillfully moves her camera towards the characters in a space to focus on the emotion using close-ups and shallow depth of field. So that balance between visually stunning landscapes and focusing on the characters' emotions is a very elegant aspect of her cinematography overall. Yeah.
They also seem like they're on like polar ends, right? Establishing landscape feels like
That's
a
true.
very third person.
Yeah,
POV,
yeah,
polar,
yeah. That is true. So
Lot
that
versatility.
that balance is very, very beautiful in her work, both even in Wakanda Forever, for that matter. So yeah,
I think it's easy to miss that kind of stuff with like big picture Marvel films, Disney films, and stuff like that, because they kind of
Yeah.
throw a bunch of VFX and high saturation
True.
in your face.
True,
But I
true.
thought,
Yeah, yeah.
I loved how like fluid Sinners, right, in terms of its visual language.
Yeah.
Because I think
Fluid
it
is a
like,
good word. Yeah.
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 Well, for
yeah,
me, it was just, it felt like it is a genre switch, right? And it's a pretty like swift genre switch. It's not like it kind of flows in, not how I read it. So it was very interesting to see how they handle that.
Yeah.
Okay. Was there something else you
And
wanted to?
yeah, like when you were talking about fluidity, I was also thinking about how the one of my favorite shots in the movie is that whole what seems like a long take, but I just recently found out that it's not. When
Don't say
I was
it.
yeah, it's actually not, because IMAX cameras have its own limitations, because apparently they don't roll for more than a minute and a half. So now you have to choreograph the movements according to where the story has to land every time. So, and Ludwig Göransson, like he was amazing in the movie. The whole music was one of my second favorite things in the movie after cinematography. So he was there on set playing the role of a DJ, trying to play the music and coordinate and do this very beautiful choreography between music and the camera. And then they finally stitch that whole thing together. And the way the camera moves, it almost feels like it's not showing, but it's rather seeking and finding the spirits that are being invoked through the music. And that's just a very ethereal experience that you bring out in the audience.
Dude, seeking is such a smart way to put it, because that's exactly
Yeah.
how it felt. And
Yeah,
also
yeah,
like
yeah.
really like, so I had heard that it was that there were cuts, that there were invisible cuts, but I didn't know it was happening every minute.
Yeah.
I thought it was more like on an as needed basis, but I guess not. Interesting. Did not know that IMAX cameras had those limitations. You've shot your fair share of. Uh, I would say you've shot your fair share of films, short form, long form, all of that. Can you tell me what it's been like to be, well, just your experience as a DP in general, but also if you found that being a woman has perks or has limitations on set?
To be a cinematographer generally on set means you need to be a good communicator and you need to know exactly what you want. And that pressure is just doubled when you're a woman, because you're also trying to prove yourself all the time. Even if that's not what everybody around you is expecting, that's sometimes the pressure that you put on yourself as a woman. So personally, I've made a few mistakes in my past where I have made an assumption that somebody already knows what I'm talking about. And especially at an indie level, when you're working with people of different levels of experience, it is on you as the head of the department to communicate, teach, and uplift the team around you. Otherwise, you're either perceived as ignorant or arrogant. So those are one of the bigger challenges that you have to navigate. And the fact that today studios are putting a trust in a woman's choices and hiring Autumn and even Alicia Brooks, who did Tick Tick Boom and who shot Wicked. They're doing big studio movies clearly because something has changed. People are trusting women in making good cinematography choices. So that changes the narrative from for me to be not. So that changes the narrative for me to not just shoot art movies, but also get into studios in the future. So I just Googled this before coming into the podcast. Brian Murphy was the first female cinematographer who got into the ASC. And this was in the 1980s. It was not long ago, it was very recent.
Yeah.
So if you take that timeline into consideration, then
Yeah.
Autumn winning her first award for cinematography is not a surprise. So, yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's I like every time I have these conversations, right? Like whether it's about writing or what in whatever context, it's just it always ends with a like sad sigh at the end. Just being like, but yeah, it's all
Yeah.
right. You said something super interesting where you said you feel like because these people have gone out and shot stuff like Tick Tick Boom, Wicked, whatever, you feel like the door has opened for more mainstream for women to feel like they can be in more mainstream spaces and not just
Yeah.
shoot art films. Would you say that was kind of the perception in the past? Is that hey, kind of only small budget like art films will hire women because trust issues or whatever?
Yeah. Because in a big studio, you're always expected to communicate with a number of departments, and it's and that takes a lot of skill. So if you're not easily trusted, be it your gender, race, whatever it is, it's going to be very difficult for you to convince your ideas and your thoughts, your entire process, where you want your light to go, where you want your camera to go. That's going to be difficult if the crew around you is not going to trust you. And that's one of the major key things that you have to take away from some of my experiences, is that you need to surround yourself with a crew that trusts you. If you have the power to as a head of the department, if you have the power to choose your own crew, you might as well choose somebody who will be your support system, who will trust you, who will also help you when you're stuck, rather than surrounding yourself with just people who are skilled but may not like your ideas. So if unfortunately you are not in the position to select your own crew, then you might be left with the option of stroking people's egos, which is not something I'd want to do, but if that's what has to get the job done, you have to.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. It's interesting because I feel like there's just so many layers between like being able to just do your job and existing. It's frustrating, but
Yeah.
there's people paving the way, so hopefully shit changes soon.
There are, and even like equipment wise, I feel things are changing, because equipment and accessories that were previously made for men's bodies are today adapting to women. This happened to me when I was about to shoot a movie, and I was talking to a rental house about renting out a Steadicam. And the rental house guy was like, is it a woman or a man operating? And I was confused. So on hearing my confusion, he was like, we make different vests for different body types. And that pleasantly surprised me. I'm like, okay,
Yeah.
I'm living in a nice timeline then. Lucky
No,
me.
I'm delighted to hear that.
Yeah.
Did you try it out? Was it different and was it better?
No, because it was a male who was going to operate the Steadicam on my set. But there are a lot of women showing an interest in
Yeah.
operating Steadicams these days. So that's kind of nice.
Yeah, no, that's like I'm like surprised enough to not have words to say. Like that's really cool. I mean, before we started this call and we were having a little chat and prepping for this episode. At which point we were talking about something that I thought was very interesting. We were talking about diversity and kind of what it means to hire diversely, what it means to have true representation and why it's important, right? because when you take something like cinematography, or I would say most things that are considered hard skills, there is an unfortunate argument that comes with it, which is saying, hey, this is a skill-based profession. We shouldn't be hiring based on gender, color, race, whatever, right? But I think anybody who comes from any general intersectionality will tell you that identity comes with perspective. Um, with that being the context, what do you think? I mean, very often we see that when you go on set, you're not a cinematographer, you're the female cinematographer. I'm not a writer, I'm the female writer.
Female writer.
It kind of comes with some weight, but I also think it comes with like a role that I take with a lot, that I take very seriously. Because I do think it helps, like, diversity helps with perspective. You know, in the space of cinematography, what do you think, you know, diversity adds, or especially like the perspective of a woman adds on set?
Yeah. So in the space of cinematography, I feel talking about the female gaze is very controversial. Not a lot of people would agree that there is anything called a female gaze. Perspectives definitely matter. We all see the world differently. A shorter person sees the world differently from a taller person, you know, and an ant's view is different from a bird's, and adopting the right kind of perspective in visual storytelling makes all the difference in how a story is perceived. But I also like this African proverb that says, until the lion learns to write, every story will glorify the hunter. So, yeah, it's a fun proverb. So, so I feel like in case of stories, that makes a lot of sense. How a woman might approach a scene about her getting her first period might be vastly different from how a man might tell it simply because of personal experience. But in terms of cinematography, I cannot say for certain there is a female gaze, because the vision is coming from the story. So I feel when it comes to cinematography, representation of women in the field of cinematography matters more than how a woman's eyes might tell a story different from a man. So for example, why does my perspective matter as an Indian cultural theatre artist, as a performing artist? I might tell a story different from probably a white man, and change the Hollywood structure a bit, and you know, not make it typical, and structure it a little more colorfully, or less dark, something depending on the story, of course. So I guess perspectives definitely matter and representations matter, but I cannot say for certain if there is something called a female gaze.
Yeah, I mean, I also think
Yeah.
we shouldn't have to justify our presence on sets.
Yeah.
Saying, hey, I bring this to the table that's more than the work. It's like,
Yeah,
no,
yeah.
just higher perspective.
That's
But
true,
also
yeah.
perspective helps. Yeah.
Yeah.
So usually when we come to the end of the podcast, we do a bunch of recommendations. It's usually based on the movies we talk about earlier in the podcast, but today, because we've been talking all cinematography, are there movies you'd like to recommend? You know, good stuff that you've watched?
So here's my take. I feel like movies are the best form of art because it has everything. It has you have poetry in the form of dialogues, you have painting in the form of light, and you have music in the form of background score. So with something like that, it has to have everything. I would enjoy a movie that has everything in it. So when it comes to that, it's always Skyfall for me. Roger Deakins is the most brilliant kind of a cinematographer I've seen in my lifetime. So the way, especially the whole elevator sequence, him chasing across the reflections, that chase scene could have been shot any which way. It could have been a regular chase sequence, but he chose to make it so beautiful. It's an action movie, but it's so beautiful. So yeah, I would say Skyfall is one of my favorite movies.
Yeah, I mean, if there's like anybody watching this who hasn't watched Skyfall, they should check it out. Although I'm sure that most people have. definitely come across this film in their lifetime. Uh, but no, thank you so much for joining me for this episode. It was great talking to you. I hope everybody will enjoy watching this episode as much as we enjoyed making it. Are there any parting words, any projects you'd like to plug?
It was great talking to you too, Keetna. I was looking forward to this. I was able to kind of dive into my own thoughts before this podcast, and I was able to kind of discover my own opinions a lot more clearly after this episode. So, thank you for that.